I see everyone is coming in now. Welcome to this first online meeting of the ASC's Art, Media and Cybernetics Working Group, organized by the AMC. And we're very, very happy to have this morning for most of you. For me, it's tonight, but for most of you, it's this morning. Art.Ascott in discussion with our working group, and I'm really, really happy to, I think is such a great opportunity, and yeah, to welcome someone who's been so influential in the art and in bringing cybernetics really to the art world. And I did my PhD in the Planetary Collegium that was founded by Art.Ascott. And this as well has been such a, such an experience for me. I can't put it in a few minutes, but I will hand over now to the AMC working group to introduce today's event. And regarding the ASC, for those of you who join here this meeting, if you are interested in becoming a member of the ASC, please go to the website. If you are interested in working with the working group, you may contact people via the chat, or there should be also something on the website and you'll be able to find contacts. Yeah, so I hand over now. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. So I'm just going to give a really quick introduction to what the AMC work group is, and then I'm going to hand this over to my one of the members of the AMC to give the introduction to the event tonight. So as part of the American Society of Cybernetics, we explore the evolving intersections of cybernetics, arts, and science, building on mid-20th century movements where artists and cyberneticians pioneered conceptual and collaborative approaches. Through panel discussions, online events, and in a growing index of artists, theorists, and key concepts, we examine how cybernetic thinking continues to shape art and media in today's technological and ecological landscape. We aim to advance cybernetics in artistic practices, foster interdisciplinary dialogue, and connect students, practitioners, and researchers in rethinking art as a reflexive system. And with that, I'm going to pass this along to Vivian.
Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm here to introduce to you our first year of activities, general objectives, and also this first speaker event. So for the year of 2025, the working group will host a series of events that explores the topics of cybernetic ontology to better understand the trajectory of cybernetics as an epistemology, a practice, and a method, and also to identify potential developmental trajectories for the future. We examine this through the lens of tangible cybernetic manifestations, specifically performative artifacts and system-based art and design practices. So for this first event, we were very honored to invite pioneering British artist and theorist Art.Ascott, whose work in cybernetic art and his focus on the impact of digital and telecommunications networks on consciousness has been widely exhibited around the world. He is also the recipient of the first Ars Electronica Golden Nica Award for Visionary Pioneer of Media Art. Roy is also very well known as a radical innovator in education, specifically within cybernetic and telecommunication arts. And he has held leading academic roles in Europe, Australia, Brazil, Canada, the USA, and UNESCO. So without further delay, I'd like to pass this on to Yannis Spartacus, who will be leading this conversation today with Roy. All right.
Hi, good evening, everyone. dear Roy, I will start with a very simple starting of this discussion by asking you a double question. And this double question has to do with these two fields that are interesting today, art and cybernetics. And the question is, how did you start with art? What happened and you started working with art? And then eventually, how do you meet and encounter cybernetics?
Yeah, well, I studied after I did 2 years in national service in the Air Force, and as one book published, I forget, I should remember, I'm afraid the author said quite clear that there was an influence there alone on my thinking. And I was working with radar, fighter control, anyway, but evolved lots of sort of machines and reading signs and all that sort of stuff, you know. And then I went to college in Newcastle with Victor Passmore, particularly, and Richard Hamilton. And as a result, I became the Passmore's assistant for a year, spent a lot of time in the stacks of the university, and quite by chance came across books by F.H. George, Ross Ashby. I can't remember all the names now, but a whole lot of things introduced me to this field of cybernetics and so forth.
Thank you. I think you're mentioning the book from Kate Sloan.
Of whom, sorry?
Kate Sloan, on your work, where she mentions your work in the Royal Air Force and this.
Oh, sorry, no. Yes, I can't remember the author now of the book. That's really, I'm ashamed of that. But yes, there is a book looking at the influence of all that on my work and so on. Yeah.
Yes. I think it's Kate Sloan from.
That's it. Sorry, Kate. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's it. Correct. Yeah.
So this is the beginning, right? This is how you go into art, and then eventually you find these books and you start understanding that there is this field of cybernetics.
Yeah, it was basically. Go on. Sorry.
No. Please go on. Please go on.
Well, no, I mean, it just struck me that because the main sort of stuff to do with cybernetics that first impressed me, or first came upon, was biological cybernetics. So fortunately, in my view, I bypassed all the hype, which was becoming then, or a little bit later on, really current about the machines and all God knows what. But some wonderful books on biology and the cybernetics of biological cybernetics and so on impressed me enormously. And ideas of behavior and behaviorism interested me a lot, and all that sort of field, and the fiction and so on, all surrounding what to me was becoming hugely important. And so, as I say, I was fortunately given this job because of Passmore down at this London Art School to set up a 2-year course, a kind of foundation course. And that's where I sort of tried to apply all these ideas of cybernetics. And as a result, of course, well, not of course, but happened to attract people in London who were sort of interested in cybernetics, not a lot of people, but so, you know, began to sort of relate in various ways to this and that person and so on. But no, it was quite interesting to look upon the thing as an organism, which I tried to impress on the students, that they, of course, are a solitary organism, but that solitary organism only functions as a part of a larger organism. And if we're talking about creativity, wouldn't it be sort of appropriate that we look at the creativity of the larger organism that would then sort of feed down, rather than the standard way, which is to take the individual and, as it were, develop their artistic skills, and then it contributes to society. So it was very much sort of getting these students to think about the whole human being, and to devise ways in which identity could change, behavior might change related to changes in the environment, changes in the weather, So various kinds of, sometimes working with them as an organism, say 5 or 6, and sometimes individually. The whole sort of program was based on this rather simple notion, this idea of behavior. And as I say, it attracted in various ways. I was quite active in 1 or 2 things in London. So people like Pask and so on, became involved. And then Cedric Price, along with Will Alsop, these architects, at this stage, they'd met up with Joan Littlewood, Littlewood was a theatre director, rather well known from the East End. And so you had this idea of a fun palace. And the fun palace would be strictly a cybernetic organism, really, essentially. And it would be adaptable and adaptive and so on and so forth. And I had the fortunate and wonderful opportunity to sort of lead what could be sort of art bit in it. And I was there when there's this guy, Stanley Matthews, the architect, has written in his book. I came up with the idea of the pillar of information, which was not unlike one of those tools we use, rather well known today, to get information about everything that could cross-reference. And so the idea was that this fun palace would also have a sort of brain, in a sense, certainly have a memory, and that one could, each individual playing within it or playing it or whatsoever, so to speak, could then access this larger memory of ideas and relationships and so on. So that was the idea, the way a piece of architecture could acquire a kind of behavioral identity, I suppose. It sounds a bit posh, but that kind of idea. And so, yeah, I worked a lot with Pask and many, and Cedric Price, Will Alsop, and so on. And they were very interesting days as well. I think I've lost the question now.
Not at all. I think the question is also a bit abstract on purpose to allow that meandering as well. But one point that I would like to ask here is, because you mentioned the ground course and education, and at the same time you mentioned your influence on cybernetics on your own art, and these are 2 different areas, like education and your art practice as well. How do you manage to combine them, and how did cybernetics play a role in that combination?
Well, it was as I say from the start, it was biological cybernetics. It's really awful. You've got a 90-year-old man here with no memory, but trying to remember a very key book. But whatever it was, I mean, all the literature like Design for a Brain and these sort of things, I happened upon. That was a thing in these stacks of the library, and it just seemed the way to go. I mean, I wasn't at that stage. I even thinking of being a teacher. I was just an artist, until they offered me this job in London, or Victor set up this job. And so when I did, as I say, I said, well, we'll see it as an organism. We'll see the 2 years as an organism, elements within it, and they will learn by various kinds of games or whatever I would introduce them to, the nature of inside out, because it seemed to me a great deal of art education was outside in. Look at this, but how that way, round rather than this way, and then a bit of both. So, and then trying to construct something which was actually more than just rabbiting on in front of a bunch of students. So set up these various things. There's various wonderful ways in which they developed things. I mean, the first thing they had to do was to develop some mechanism, some way by which the environment could be encountered in this way. How could one read aspects of the environment in a different kind of way? And so either as an organism of 5 or 6 of them, or as a singular person, what would you design? Some design sort of a wrist rot kind of thing, or something around the neck or whatsoever. But the point of it was that their behavior was relative to the changes in the environment. And so the famous one is Pete Townsend, the musician, who was a student of mine, rattling around the corridors of Ealing Art School in a trolley because he could not use his legs, as a result of this, one of these sort of things. So basically, and it led them into trouble, actually, in terms of the things on the pavement where the police got involved. But basically, it was like their whole creative life rethinking how it is, rather than this solitary artist who pours forth, not to put that down, but pours forth the art. But so the idea of one's part of an organism willy-nilly, but let's not be willy-nilly, let's actually look at these organisms and play them and develop them. That was the course, a two-year course, basically. That was what it was. But in the way, I've got to say, and it was very, very fortunate. I mean, people like Kittai and Harold Cohen and a lot of painters and so on at the time also came in and did stuff and got things going as well. So it was a bit richer than just just the thing I'm describing. But that was it, two-year course, and then it went on up to Ipswich. Where, I mean, I only went there because they offered a sort of 30-foot studio. I mean, just unbelievable. And tried to set up there, but the big boys from London came up and shat on it, to put it very, very simply. No, we can't. This is too personal. What if Ascott leaves? So I was fired. And anyway, I could go on, but I ended up in a lovely teaching drawing in a girls' school. I went delightful little 15-year-olds doing drawings and stuff. But then I quickly became president of the Ontario College of Art a year later, which was a bit of a change around. So and then so on, and then on it went from there. But that was the old thing. But to answer you, I tried to embed these ideas that I'd first acquired about biological cybernetics to, the real world, or the world that I was dealing with. And that was it, essentially. Sorry, I rabbited on a bit there, but there we go. That was the picture. Yeah.
So in that sense, you are using the ideas of cybernetics for education, for creating relationality and systems, organisms, as you mentioned. You mentioned also the Groundcourse, which is this 2-year program. And I remember from one of our discussions, you mentioned very clearly that the Groundcourse is necessary for restructuring the way the students were thinking, and reconsidering what they think about creativity and art. And eventually that became the famous calibrator of human behavior.
Right, yes. The calibrators.
Would you like to mention a bit of that?
The calibrators, yes. Well, the best of, there's a wonderful photograph of the National Photographic Gallery in London of Prince somebody or one of these people, famous photographers took. I forgot what it's called now. And that was them building quite an elaborate machine, really. But basically, it was either they could decide a wristwatch type of thing, or something around the neck, or something they would build, or an actual environment. But basically, what it would be sensitive and aware of, analytical of changes of behavior in the environment, and how one might then change those behaviors, or change one's own behavior, or change a situation in which people engaging with something would change their behavior. But the emphasis was always on the behavior, which of course led them back to ideas and so on. But I not as a matter of principle or anything, but I just wanted to counter the idea of the lone artist kind of sort of in the studio, all these other people buzzing around with a huge thing on a board, trying to decide whether it was yellow or black or pink with dots and all that sort of thing. Not put it all down. But, you know, it's another way to release creativity in these very young people, because some of them, I think, were like 16. I think Brian Eno was probably about, perhaps he was 17 or 18 when he came. And Townsend was, I think Townsend was 16, actually.
Wow.
You know, so they were quite young people. Mm. Wonderfully open, I must say, all of them. Mm.
So, I mean, from that point and on, you continue, as you mentioned, you went, eventually went to Canada, and you organized relational courses and programs that were a bit non-traditional, right? And eventually you formed educational structures in the USA, and then planetary systems of education, and then in China, your studio. How would you compare, or how would you see different people from different places, different geographies, different cultures? Are there commonalities, are differences? What would you think about that in this topic, right?
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah, let me think now, really. I think that often a certain amount of politics was involved, that one would be supported in what one was trying to do, not necessarily for the thing in itself, because it may not be fully understood by the backer, but politically they wanted to oppose something else, and so that sort of thing could happen. And I think the OCA in Canada was a bit like that. It's quite a funny story, if I may take the time. I mean, I was over there with my wife and family just visiting Canada, and somebody wanted me to give some lectures at some college outside of Toronto, and then Anthony Benjamin is one of the key teachers down at in England, you know, at Ealing. It was in Toronto, and he literally phoned me up and said, "Hey, Roy, I'm at the Ontario College of Art." He said, "They're looking for a president." I said, "Do you want to do it?" So I said, "Well, I'll have a go." So I actually did go down. I used to wear shades in those days, probably trying to look rather clever or something. So I showed up at this sort of, I mean, this pretty traditional place, Toronto, actually, you know, and all these lovely people sitting around in sort of almost dinner chat, you know, all sort of dressed up and all that stuff. And I came and did you know, did my number, I suppose you could say. And yeah, so we went out for a break, and we had a break, and I'm sort of sipping a cup of coffee, and this very tall chairman comes over to me and says something like 64. Oh, Jesus, what does that mean? So I said, yes, so someone does. Of course, you know, being English. So he goes back and says, well, I'm pleased to say that Art.Ascott has accepted the presidency of the Ontario College of Art, $64,000 a year. I thought, what? God. So, and it was great for a year. It was really great because a lot of people kind of, well, without even knowing what I don't know what I was about actually, but I mean, they wouldn't have done, but they did sense there was a possibility of change here. So lots of wonderful people with terrific ideas came along, and wonderfully, I had the power to say, just do it. And in my view, and some of their views, that was wonderful. Then the old guard, about 6 of them, who had all taken their year out, what do we call it, sabbatical, whatever it's called, in Europe. And they all came back and they were absolutely shocked. You know, one's office that had his private printing press was taken over by somebody, and kids, students using, you know, really a big political thing as well. I didn't really penetrate what it was, but it was massive, and it was bye Ascott. I don't think their suggestion was I could run a sort of small course. There was a building down the road from the OCA, and we could perhaps run a little course there. Would I like to do that? So I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. Thank you. So fortunately, it resulted in a sort of golden handshake, which set me up for quite a while. And so anyway, that was the Canadian thing, and then down where else? I can't remember where else I went. I can't remember what I did after that.
San Francisco.
San Francisco, California.
San Francisco. Oh, no, San Francisco, yes. Oh, that's right. I came back to England, and this friend of mine, I'd set up a rather radical thing in Toronto at one stage. This chap had seen it, was very impressed, phoned me up and said, would you like to be the vice president and dean of the San Francisco Art Institute? And I said, yeah, okay. So I went over with a family, and you know, I was interviewed and stuff, and I got the job. But it was a time. The man who appointed me, I don't want to bad mouth him, but Herstan was. He was at the time. He'd become somehow the president of the San Francisco Art Institute. I don't know how, but he had. And so and on his appointment, I was brought in on his appointment, and he had his first meeting with all the students and staff in this massive place they had there, sort of stepped up steps and all that sort of stuff, you know, with people, students, concrete sort of seats and all that. And he gave his talk, and he was saying all the wrong things. Like he'd already had an interview in the San Francisco Chronicle saying, yes, well, we now have a really good numbering system on the doors. It is a Bauhaus base. You know, what? This is the San Francisco Art Institute, man. We don't even have door signs. We don't have doors. We put them off. We don't. You know, the place was madness, wonderful, creative madness. So he did talk and introduced me as a dean, and went on to say more things so asinine. They were really, really angry. They were chucking stuff at him. And this is absolutely the case. He went out. He never, ever came back. That was it. End of it. So I had to be not only been introduced as his dean, God help me, but it would suddenly be the acting president. And I remember it so clearly. A guy at the back of this stepped up place shouted down, I know you, Ascott, and you're fucking change painting crap, or something like that, which unfortunately in those days I didn't have such a self-control. So I charged up these concrete steps and just, and oh, it's awful. The blood came from his nose. The whole place just erupted. I mean, it was just chaos. So I managed to get down all these steps into my office, and I thought, that's it, I'm dead. That's the end of it. And in comes Larry Jordan, one of the key players there as an artist, filmmaker, artist, came round my desk, held my head and kissed me on the brow and said, man. And then Raimondini, a really left-wing lecturer and stuff, came in and said, Roy, the man. And I thought, what? So the place was immediately divided between all the old timers. And the big mistake I made was to say, the first thing I could do is the salaries were pathetic for these people. I mean, beyond pathetic. Couldn't understand it. So I had this big meeting, and I said, well, look, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do is make bloody sure your salaries are hoisted up to a reasonable amount. That was the kiss of death. That was literally the kiss of death. Why? Because people from the East would apply for jobs. And these guys, you know, in their caravans and all stuff, coming in 3 days a week with most of the dope, and not to put it all down, some of them wonderful artists, but, you know, you can imagine this sort of scene. Suddenly these people from the East are going to come. So then I suffered a lot of, it was really, really a bad scene, and sort of all that stuff. So, but I had some great times. I mean, the most notable one was a German artist. I should remember his name, but he's very famous for having dinner parties and then sticking all the stuff on the table down and then selling it to a museum. He's a German artist. I can't think of his name now, but he I had this, he became our visiting artist and staying in a little place that we had for the artist downstairs. So we laid on a dinner. We laid on and we had an exhibition, that was it. And his thing was all about tabletops and all that stuff. And then he'd stick them down. So this was a set of tabletops, and all the big ones from art, putting more money into the Art Institute and all that sort of stuff, came to it. And he made this famous sort of one of the sort of tabletop cake, brilliantly made, you see, and came out, you know, they're all sitting there in dinner jackets. Oh no, he asked them to bring interesting implements to eat with, because they all thought my table would be stuck down and be in the Museum of Modern Art, you know, that sort of crap. So they're all there. And he comes out with this thing he's very proud of, this cake. And an old lady who'd just come from the loo, which was also at the back, came up and said something, my, and sort of put a finger on the thing he licked it. He went absolutely, utterly berserk. He chucked the cake in the middle of the room and hit the woman right in the face like that. I thought, my God, so I pulled him back. The place absolutely erupted. It was absolute chaos. And I can't describe it. So we managed to smuggle him out the back. There was a way through. And I had a van in those days. I lived down the coast. And this maniac was in the front seat of the van. And the way down to where I lived was down the mountain, all the way down the mountain on the other side. And he kept trying to jump out. I've had it to jump. So my wife, the time, was grabbing hold of him. Absolute nightmare madness, it really was. So that was one of my introductions to the San Francisco Art Institute. But it couldn't last. We'd had a wonderful possibility for a guy to take over as president. And I mean, there's no way I could be present, in the sense that the job meant going up to New York all the time, to Woolworth and all these people, and getting money, and that's all it was all about, really, and you know, dinners and stuff that didn't really interest me. So we had some guy lined up, and he didn't get it, and then they bad man, I won't say his name anyway, but they appointed a guy whose whole experience of art was running a street art for the kids in his neighborhood. It was a very worthy thing to do, but for the biggest art school on the West Coast, it wasn't really ideal. Anyway, to cut it short, I quit, or was quitted, whichever way you want to put it, and came back to England. And I'm trying to think where I went from there. I can't remember. But anyway, was that the question, the American thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly about the whole difference of behavior and mentality in different places.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. Yeah. So no, the thing there was, it was very French. You know, the old idea of a French artist. So anything other than that was right out of the picture. And in fact, you didn't teach. That was their way. I mean, you just had a studio, and you had a guy who was paid to drink most of the day and perhaps look in a few times, once or twice, and say, "That's great, man." Or, I don't want to put it down, but it was a little bit like that. Anyway, that was how I saw it. And so I forget what, I moved back to England, and then I taught in, I can't remember it all now, Germany. I'm trying to remember it all, actually.
In Vienna, probably. When did you go to Vienna?
Yes, that's right. Now, Bob Adrian, a Canadian artist who lived in Vienna, I think, and Heidi, his wife. I forget what happened. I was invited over to give a talk or something like that. I can't quite remember. And I stayed with them. Wonderful people. And they proposed me as president of the whatever it's called, the Angewandte Kunst in Vienna. Is that right? Yes, I think. Yeah, something Angewandte Kunst. I don't remember the name of it. And
yes, it's University of Applied Arts, or the Angewandte.
Yeah, that's it. Angewandte, yeah. Anyway, so that was great. I there did first some things I had started in England. I was able to get equipment to set up some sort of interactive projects with the students in Australia and things like that. That was quite good. And gosh, I'm trying to remember it all now. It's awful, isn't it? But I did quite a lot in Vienna. Of course, there was Ars Electronica as well, and I became quite a sort of involved in some ways with them and the building. I certainly proposed a design for their building. Just as an indicator, I was rather involved with them in certain sorts of ways and stuff like that. And so Angamanta and some wonderful artists there and so on. And I can't remember how that ended actually. It's awful, isn't it? I can't think what happened after that, frankly. Sorry. My age is telling a bit.
I think we all get the whole picture until now. I think it's more than enough. I don't want you to be more troubled about that. There's a question here, though, that I think a bit related to the list we have here for questions is, I mean, you're describing elements of societies and politics in the top chain of the universities and educations. And the question is, how would you consider the evolution of the relationship between technology, society, and art, and how that changed through the beginning of your career, from the first steps in the early 60s until even now? I mean, until the
how do I develop the stuff? I mean, well, I don't know what you mean, but
more how you would consider that all this connection between art, technology, and society has changed. I mean, from the early years until now. And then
have they developed, you mean, or
how do you think it has changed?
I see. In the situation generally, do you mean?
Yes, exactly. More
well, I think I don't now. I have absolutely no idea what's happened in London, in the sense that I think the whole superstructure of education has collapsed. The art school education has collapsed in London. I don't see any innovations at all, quite frankly. There used to be little sort of St. Martin's, for example, would have Will Alsop and people like this, really experimental things going on. To be frank, though, I really don't know what the scene is. I've been down here 5 years. As far as I can imagine, things must hopefully have developed greatly. However, there's no public evidence of that, frankly. So I have absolutely no idea what is going on, really. I think that more and more young people now are recognizing the value of collective action, that an art school doesn't really authorize you with anything anyway. You come out, well, okay, you can teach for tuppence a week in a secondary school if that's what you want to do. If you're really dedicated, if you're not, you better not do it. If you're not really dedicated to the young people, then don't mess about, don't treat it as an income. And where I think you could perhaps find ways of doing that in the past, now I think most artists I understand it are saying, look, we'll bunch together, guys, we'll put all our resources together, we can get this big space, at the moment it's for free or whatever, let's get on with it, and we might bring some interesting people in or something, but basically find a way. So that, I mean, at a distance, that is my understanding of how it's really developing now. And then you've got the sort of posh bit, the Royal College of Art, which really is a sort of medal awarding. I don't want to put it down, but I mean, frankly, I think it is. I see no innovation there, let's put it that way. I see no new approaches to saying, well, my God, the world is changing in such a way, not just through technology, politically and so on, how do we deal with all of this? You know, we're just not going to sit back and find the next pretty landscape. Not that I'm suggesting it's quite as crude as that, but I don't have any sense of any structures or any real that sort of thing developing. But I have to admit, I am a bit out, you know, I'm out of touch. So maybe I hope I'm right. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there is somewhere in north of England or God knows where, someone who's really trying to create a new, more relevant situation in which creative minds can impact their own lives and society. But I'm a little doubtful of that, quite frankly, at the moment. Anyway, a pessimistic view.
But what do you see in that future of technology, art, and education? Do you see any future of that in any way that cybernetics or not can be connected with it?
I think personally, but I still feel that the way forward in which one could utilize knowledge and tools and skills that are being developed will be if we do try to think about buildings and institutions and groups of people and individual people as creative organisms, and you know, you see what I mean, and rethink how the bits relate and how the bits interact with the environment they're in and how the larger environment and I think we're in an era now, a rather frightening one, in which things are being reduced to rather simple forms. You know, it's either Heil Hitler or it's God help us. I mean, there's no real subtlety in clearly in society, and a lot of sort of suspicion of everything. I mean, I think things, I can think what it's called. It's not LinkedIn. There's another thing that people use frequently all the time. I forget what it's called now, but it's one of these online things, and they purport to give newscasts about what's going on. They're all fake. And, you know, one established that the King of England had died or something, you know, and it's all this sort of rubbish fed in with other things and Mary's new dress. And then, you know, I forget what the damn thing's called, but it's one of these things that people click on and watch all the time and so on, like LinkedIn, but it's not that. Anyway, I can't think what it's called now. But there's that kind of culture going on, and but I have to be wary about what I say, and we're talking quite intimately, really, I hope, because I have no real knowledge of what's actually happening, and I love to think that somewhere in the corner of some part of London or Paris or New York, a new kind of idea about creativity in society is burgeoning, and that would be lovely to think. But my experience at the moment is that we're in the trough, not necessarily of despair, but certainly of in real kind of creative activity. And I'm not trying to judge my fellows. I just feel that environment, you know, culturally, environmentally, really.
I think we have some questions from the observers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a few questions. Maria Riosaraya, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, but she asked, is the arts and cybernetic system, or better say systemic, was one of, but if you like to also reiterate your question, you are more than welcome as well.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Can I read that? I think I read it in the text, right? In the chat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Okay.
Is the art some cybernetic
system?
Or better say a systemic, is it a systemic art as a concept, right? This is my understanding, right?
I'm really terribly sorry. It's either I can't hear properly. I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm trying to read the text. One moment. Is the art some cybernetic system? Is art a cybernetic system? I think this is.
Oh, I see.
Can we consider art as a cybernetic system?
I understand. Yes. Well, I would put it this way. I think an understanding of art is very accessible by applying the sort of questions one applies to establishing cybernetic systems and developing them and so on. So I would say that art practice is amenable to that analysis and to its development. Yes, I do think that. I think that because cybernetics is concerned with the whole and the interrelationship of parts and how you change this part, another part alters, and the whole idea of interactivity within the organism, and then interactivity between the organism and its environment at various sorts of levels, biological, social, even political to some extent, but certainly socially and culturally. So yes, I think the application of cybernetics is very relative. I wish we could find another word for it, because it sort of carries lots of still carries lots of sort of zombie connotations to many people. I think, you know, or you're not zombie, but you know what I mean, the sort of mechanical sort of thing. But and this is why I feel if I, as I do with when young students, sort of introduce them to cybernetic thinking, it's always from, and remains with, as a matter of fact, for me, from the biological point of view, the biological organism and interactivities within it, and seeing it as part of a larger organism and so on, and those sort of interactions. But given that model, I think then it is applicable to all kinds of political and social and even, I suppose, commercial situations.
Do we have any questions? Let me see that.
Yes, we have, in addition to Leslie, what does it mean to resist meaningfully? I think it's relevant here. But then we have also Mark Sullivan asking one question. Would you like to read your question, Mark?
Sure.
Or should I go and read it?
I can read it.
Okay.
In one of the essays in Telematic Embrace, you wrote the following: visionary pragmatism is perhaps the most useful way to inform the artist's participation in building worlds we would want to live in. Visionary pragmatism can take the love inherent in the telematic embrace and create new relationships, new societies, and new culture. Just as art in the next 100 years will be not only interactive, but also psychoactive and proactive, so human affairs will benefit from closer connectivity, distributed intelligence, and spiritual solidarity. My question comes now. How can we figure out what might be the index of pragmatic visionary activity now?
Well, I mean, the sort of obvious answer in one sense, which is almost meaningless, is by its effects. I mean, do we discern in society or in its practices or at various sort of levels of human behavior distinct changes which could be related to changes in the environment largely, and can we track their efficacy of their tools and their resonance if they're concerned with sentiment or a spiritual meaning and so on. So I can only really give that sort of bland answer, I think, to your question. It's a really good question, but I think it takes, I mean, I think all these sort of questions that come up in this sort of field that we're addressing can only be usefully developed with two or more minds interacting. I think that the human mind alone always needs a kind of stimulation, which books and so on and solitary considerations don't really don't serve terribly well. And that's one of the things in our society which we we seem to lack is the sort of models of thinking, organisms of thought. We have the university, and then we have, occasionally funded think tanks. But the idea generally of addressing questions and having some sort of almost formula by which more than one mind can interact with others to try to find solutions, I think is part of the thing. But I'm probably getting a bit off the point now.
No, actually, it's right to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
One question we have is from David Pimelian, is how do you see the relationship of adaptive complex systems and cybernetics, and should it be more connected?
To the what?
How do you see the relationship of adaptive complex systems and cybernetics, and should it be more connected? David, if you want to further iterate your questions, please do.
Yeah, I just think that complex systems uses a lot of ideas from cybernetics, but they don't really engage with it. They could engage with it deeper, and some more conceptually maybe than just the scientific side of cybernetics.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, I think the term cybernetics has been largely through popular culture, attributed or related more to artificiality, artificial systems, and in extreme to robots and all that sort of thing. And I think that this is why, for me, the biology of the field is really important, which then does include emotional and spiritual and other sort of aspects of the human nature, of human condition, which, cybernetics sort of applied or used in a more utilitarian way fails to acknowledge. I think even in terms of the rudimentary or daily tasks or problems that it addresses, even simple matters like that, if they're not framed within the larger spiritual or emotional or cultural environment in which situations arise, then they're weak. So I think an over-narrow application of cybernetics is some kind of instant tool for, first of all, seeing the problem in terms of systems, and then identifying the system, addressing it, making changes, where one often may not realize that the system is actually, will be actually infinitely a subsystem of another system. And the task really for someone pragmatically engaged is to say, at this point, we'll cut off the chain. If we go further with the chain, we're not going to lead to action, but that we should recognize the chain is there, and that is coming down and informing at the more immediate level of interactions and movements and changes within a system. So I think, cybernetics it can be largely misunderstood and mishandled as a kind of more like a sort of mechanical tool than but not to overdo it, but then a sort of philosophical position from which one then proceeds to various processes of analysis and so on, and change.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, we are going to have two more questions, if that's okay. But here's Vasily Betin's question. In your view, how might the increase in integration of biological and technological actors in hybrid ecologies transform our concept of agency and creativity?
Yes, well, the whole question of creativity has always been it dows with the kind of fuel, if you light the wrong match, it would all blow up. Our understanding, I think, of what constitutes creative behavior for a start is often, I say, pre-contextualized, which does not allow for the full embodiment of thought, the full flowering of thought about an issue that has to be resolved or developed. I think the word's unfortunate, isn't it, cybernetics? If we could find another word, really, I think it would help enormously. It's got a hard edge. It doesn't have a kind of rounded, soft, organic kind of embodiment of casing, so to speak. And I would think it's immediately put off to as a tool for many people who would think this is horrible kind of mechanical, robotic kind of stuff. It doesn't touch the heart. It doesn't touch the real human. But in fact, I have an understanding of cybernetics, which is quite contrary to that. But I agree, the word is a bit loaded, and one has to work with that, I suppose.
Oh, thank you, Roy. And as for the final question by Michael Hall, when in your concept of cybernetics, the human body, the weather, and biology play a role? Did you make use of biofeedback in your work? For example, sensing breath or heartbeat and transforming this into an installation piece?
No, but I would see the value, the value in all of that. I think there's a very profound question, or has very profound implications. And as I think I said earlier, the word itself is unfortunate. It's time for someone to be producing that book or that essay or that anyway sudden insight in which the language could change a little bit and the essence of what cybernetics is about, and not forgetting its spiritual implications, for example, and its very profound biological ones at the same time. That the full flowering of what it offers as a mode of thought, of analysis and action, could really be fulfilled. So there is something unfortunate about the term that closes it down in terms even use, I would think, by many people, and that is something to be looked at, I think, and discussed and developed in some way.
Okay, thank you so much, Roy. I also want to say I graduated from SFAI in 2020, and right before the school closed, and wrote my thesis on Harold Cohen and learn about you. And I think it's also interesting to see the school getting closed and this discussions that we are having.
Yes, that's very. So I understood it might be opening again. I thought some good people are putting money back into it, set it up again. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversations are still going, but what the model will look like or how the school will reimagine itself is still there.
Hopefully it will have moved forward from the old, which in its time served us well, but now I think it needs to be reinvigorated. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, nonetheless, it was wonderful to be part of that culture that, hits you with 2x4. Yeah.
No, I know. Yes.
Okay, so I mean, first of all, we're really grateful to you, Roy, for being the inaugural guest for the AMC, and
I feel very honored. I feel very honored.
in giving us an amazing interview and conversation. And I also want to reiterate what Claudia had posted in the chat a little while ago, that Roy did receive the American Society of Cybernetics McCulloch Award this last summer at the 60th anniversary. And also, I'm really grateful for this, really global audience that we have. We have people here in Asia, continental US, Europe, UK. So really, this is really a spread of all time zones and really a global audience. So, with that, I'm just going to give a couple of really quick announcements. One, the next event with the AMC is we're hosting a 2-day event, 2-day forum basically, which is going to be over the weekend of April 26th and 27th. We're 3 guest panelists. We have Carissa Terranova, Ken Ronaldo, who I've seen in the at least the list of the chat here, and Joost Rekveld, who will present their work on Saturday the 26th and then expand upon their topics in a panel discussion on the 27th. And of course, just like this event, all registration is free and it will be hosted virtually, but we will archive everything for anyone who can't make the events. And then also for anyone interested in participating in this work group, so the Arts, Media, and Cybernetics work group, we're definitely interested in getting as many people participating as possible. So we will definitely be reaching out through our email address, which is the wg-arts.media.cybernetics@asc-cybernetics.org. I believe maybe Vivian or somebody was posting this in the chat. But please email us. We have a whole number of initiatives that we would like to start over the next year to 2 years, from things like zines to podcasts to, kind of the sky's the limit with the technology that we have today. And we really want to ignite the conversation of cybernetics, arts, and media and science. And for the very final announcement, we have an amazing representation at the Politics of the Machines conference that's coming up. I believe it's the 5th edition of Politics of the Machines. And it is going to be in Perth this summer, July 16th to the 18th. The overall theme is synthetic sentience, and it's basically hosted by the Institute of Advanced Studies, otherwise known as Symbiotica, and also UWA. And the 2 tracks, which one is co-chaired by Claudia, who is the vice president of ASC, which is grammars, taxonomies, and logics for more than human ecologies. And then track 7, which is coming out of the AMC work group, which is co-chaired by myself, Vivian Xu, and John Bardacus, which is distributed sentience. So both of those tracks, I'm not going to read through all the abstracts or anything like that, but the deadline for abstracts, which is a 500-word abstract, is coming up Saturday, March 29th. So if you're interested, I think maybe Vivian or somebody else is posting the link there, but feel free to also email us about that. And most of all, I would also like to thank Paul, Claudia, and all of ASC for letting us do this work group, and Merv, Mateus, John, Vivian, and us working together on the work group to get this started. So, and again, final thank you to Roy. We're super grateful to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time.
I was honored. Thank you very, very much for inviting me. It was most enjoyable, and I thank you very, very much. And I wish you well. I think you have wonderful aims and ambitions and activities, and I think that's just great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roy. It was lovely to see you and hear you speak. And it's the stories is what makes it, the stories are so important, and they're not normally reported, so they're so very valuable to us. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah. See you.
Okay.